I'm Brett Stimpson and I'm talking cybersecurity to Campbell McKenzie from Incident Response Solutions. Campbell, tell me a little bit about yourself and incident response, why somebody would come to you and what it is that you do for them.
Thanks, Brett. Well, I'm a forensic expert witness, previously trained by the New Zealand Police, and over the last 20 years I've been providing cyber incident response services, forensic expert witness services to generally organisations in New Zealand who have fallen victim to some form of cyber attack. In the early phases of my career, it was generally traditional crime that people would come and get forensic services for, but over the last 10 years and increasingly over the last 5, as cybersecurity has become more of a concern, we help people prepare for, respond to and recover from cyber incidents.
So we often hear about large businesses overseas being hacked or their networks being held to ransom. Are you able to give me an overview of the current threat landscape in New Zealand and what businesses should be doing to protect themselves?
Cybercrime has been an issue the entire time I've been doing this job, so now over 22 years. Sure, it's slowly grown over the years, but more recently it's become a systemic problem really. So if we look at what's happening overseas, we see in the media about large breaches and big payments being made. While the breaches may not be as big in New Zealand, they are certainly there. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a massive increase in ransomware attacks on New Zealand organisations, and that may include either the locking of files, where a ransom is required to be paid in order to be able to unlock that data and get access to it again. And more recently, the trend is for the cyber attackers to copy or exfiltrate client data and then hold the organisation to ransom and require payment in order for them to not leak that data. Another trend that we've seen as more organisations have moved to the cloud is that cyber attackers are able to more easily gain access to organisations' data, because beforehand it was sitting on a server underneath the staircase, for example. Now it's sitting in someone else's server, and if you don't have appropriate security protections in place, like a good password, multi-factor authentication and security provisioning, the attackers may be able to trick someone and get their password and perhaps even be able to steal their multi-factor authentication token, gain access to the email account and cause damage by way of fraudulent emails and stealing the data as well. For organisations looking to improve their cyber maturity, they'll probably be starting with the systems that they have in-house, but one thing that people need to pay close attention is to their supply chain. And by supply chain I mean the servers that people host their data on, and also service providers as well, because attackers know that if they can get into the supply chain and disrupt that potentially they could have hundreds if not thousands of organisations be taken out all at the same time.
Thanks for taking us through that, Campbell. That's fascinating. What can businesses do to prepare themselves?
So it starts with cyber governance. The organisations need to understand what cyber is, what the risk is and how to treat that risk, or how to mitigate that risk. One thing that I see most organisations looking to delve more into these days is preparedness. It's accepting not only if but when it's going to happen to them, but moving one step forward and going from the not when are we going to be attacked, but how are we going to be attacked. So what we work with our clients with is incident response preparedness, and that can be both just a technology outage but also a cyber outage or a cyber attack, ensuring they've got a fit for purpose incident response plan that the executive can work through should they find themselves in the middle of attack. But also it goes a step further into a playbook. So for example, if you're hit with a ransomware attack, there'll be a specific set of steps that you'll go through to respond to the ransomware attack. Much in the same way that in the aviation sector, every single aircraft has a different guide that's called the Quick Reference Handbook, and should the pilots find themselves in a sticky situation in the air, they're going to reach for the Quick Reference Handbook and they're going to follow that book. So in a cyber incident, we ensure clients have that handbook, and if they find themselves in that situation, they will go through those steps.
So is there somewhere they can go to get this handbook themselves?
There's a lot of good resource on the internet. I'd suggest any organisation can just jump onto a search engine, literally type the words cyber incident response plan, and you'll come up with a number of documents that are going to be worthwhile referring to. I do find that government guidance is well advanced, so I've started our business by referring to the US Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. That's a government agency that considers security to be so important that they've put it twice in the name of the agency. But closer to home, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre and indeed our New Zealand National Cybersecurity Centre under the Government Communications Security Bureau, they've published a series of documents including cyber governance, incident response preparedness, supply chain management, and the more recent one is budgeting for cybersecurity as well.
So the National Cybersecurity Centre has published some information online about governance. Where does that governance function sit, given that New Zealand has such a wide range of large business down to very small business?
It's a great guide, the National Cybersecurity Centre one. It's well written for all New Zealand organisations, including large corporates, government agencies and small to medium business. And they've broken it down into 6 categories essentially. But when we talk about cyber governance, yes, it sits at the top. The board and the executive have to own that, but cyber is a organisation-wide issue. For example, staff training and awareness, that's the first line of defence. A phishing email coming in, we need to ensure all staff can detect that and not click on the link if it's likely to be suspicious. Cyber governance requires expert assistance, and that may come in the form of internal resource. Or certain organisations have a Chief Information Security Officer, but if they're not large enough to have a dedicated role like that, it might be the IT manager, someone in risk, someone in legal, overseeing the cyber activities to lead into the governance function. You're going to need security policies as well, and there's a lot of generic policies that you can download from the internet, but I would just suggest to all organisations to tailor those so it suits the context of the organisation. And also, of course, depending on the amount of business that you conduct online or in a technology capacity, that will also require different policies.
So is there a particular type of framework that organisations should be looking at?
There's a number of them out there. So by way of example, ISO standards. Some organisations will be required by their customers to meet an ISO standard, and that's called 27000 series. Another set is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, otherwise known as NIST. That's the US government agency that set out a lot of protocols and procedures. About 7-8 years ago, they published the Cybersecurity Framework, and they've just updated that to version 2. And we went from version 1, which had the functions of identify your critical assets, protect your critical assets, detect if there's been a breach, and then respond to a breach and recover from a breach. And with version 2, which was rolled out this year, they've introduced the function govern. The feedback was we need a governance function within the NIST cybersecurity framework. The final example is the CIS controls. That stands for Centre for Internet Security. It's more of the hygiene factor. So it might be that you're wanting to reach ISO standards or some other standard. Everyone should really start with a basic set of controls. So in the same way that the finance function, they meet with their auditors and they're given a list of things that they need to do. Same thing in the cyberspace. There are plenty of lists of things to do. And the one that we help our clients out with most, there's 56 things to do. And that may sound like a lot, but I recommend my clients that they should work on those 56 things rather than only work on a much smaller amount.